Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a realm of shimmering dunes and merciless heat, where golden palaces glimmer like mirages under an unforgiving sun. You find yourself trudging through swirling sands that scrape your ankles, squinting at the spiked towers of a kingdom built upon wealth, war, and unwavering laws. The air tastes of scorched dates and dry wind. Behind you, distant camel bells jingle faintly, though no one seems to care if you make it to the city gates alive. This is the land of Saqqara, a desert kingdom whose rulers believed betrayal was the vilest sin of all. Here, faithfulness wasn't just encouraged. It was enforced with punishment so terrifying, they became cautionary tales traded along caravan routes. Tonight's story is about a princess who dared defy those laws and paid for it with something worse than death. You probably won't survive this journey without a sip of water, or 3. But before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand near the grand city gates, carved with verses warning travelers of the Sultan's might. Guards with curved scimitars watch every approach. The wind carries whispers of brutal justice, hands severed for theft, eyes gouged for spying, tongues cut out for blasphemy. But of all punishments here, none inspired more dread than burial alive. Historians still argue whether Saqqara's burial punishment came from early nomadic tribal customs, or was borrowed from neighboring empires to frighten citizens into moral obedience. What is known for sure is this: its severity carved obedience deep into the bones of its people. Walking through the bustling bazaar, you smell sweet saffron rice, lamb fat sizzling on bronze pans, incense curling in thin blue snakes. Merchants cry their wares: dyed silks, ivory dice, honey cakes soaked in rose water. But beneath the hum of trade lies a constant tension. Everyone knows that a single misstep could mean torture or death. And the Sultan, a man both revered and feared, ruled over all with an iron fist gloved in gold. He had 22 children, each raised to uphold his unbreakable laws. Among them was Princess Noura, his 7th daughter, known for her graceful voice when reciting poetry and her unmatched beauty. Noura spent mornings learning calligraphy, afternoons in prayer, and evenings weaving tapestries of red and lapis threads. Her chambers overlooked the East Gardens, where desert jasmines bloomed despite the dry air. Courtiers whispered about her serene beauty, but never in her presence. She walked with eyes lowered, veiled in translucent silk, embroidered with gold thread so fine it caught torchlight like drifting stars. One mainstream historical fact: Saqqara's royal women wore perfumes of crushed myrrh and pomegranate rind mixed with musk oil, said to keep their hair dark and skin soft in the desert sun. Yet even with her delicate life of luxury, one thing was drilled into Noura's mind from infancy: adultery, or even suspicion of it, meant death. No exceptions, no appeals. And here's a quirky tidbit: some nobles would bury a mirror with the accused, believing that if the soul remained trapped in guilt, their reflection would appear cracked forevermore. So imagine her world, where guards paced marble halls day and night, eunuchs managed every movement, and even her writing materials were inspected to ensure no secret letters reached unapproved hands. Noura knew the consequences. Everyone did. But you'll see, as the dunes shift beneath moonlight and hearts begin to betray reason, that even the clearest warnings can blur beneath the heat of desire. You sit cross-legged on a faded carpet woven with crescent moons and desert lilies, the scent of rosewater lantern oil drifting lazily around you. The heat presses against your shoulders as if warning you not to move. And tonight, you watch Princess Noura's story unfold, frame by slow-burning frame. The palace is vast, courtyards blooming with pomegranate trees, fountains splashing like silver rain, mosaic floors depicting falcons in mid-dive. Yet within these cool halls, Noura's days pass in silence, each hour marked by ritual and obedience. Until he arrives. His name is Asim. No royal blood flows through his veins, only dust and sweat from the stables where he works from dawn to dusk. You first glimpse him hauling sacks of barley on broad shoulders, his plain linen tunic clinging to a lean back streaked with sweat. His hair is black as burnt dates, tied roughly with a scrap of rope. When he speaks to the horses, it's in a voice softer than any court poet's verse. Historians still argue whether their meeting was deliberate, perhaps orchestrated by Noura herself, using secret signals from her balcony, or simply an accident of fate. But the first recorded mention says she saw him while riding her mare along the inner courtyard's training grounds. Asim kept his eyes lowered in respect, but just for a heartbeat. Curiosity flickered across his face. And that was it. The small tear in a dam of restraint. Each morning after, as she passed through the stables on her way to lessons, she'd catch a glimpse of him brushing down her white mare. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. Their eyes carried all the words they weren't allowed to say. One mainstream historical fact. Stable hands in desert kingdoms were often prized not only for physical strength, but also deep knowledge of herbal medicine for treating horses' wounds and fatigue. Days passed. Then weeks. Their silent glances became a dangerous ritual. And here's a quirky tidbit. In Saqqara, court records mention a secret punishment known as the listening hour, where those caught eavesdropping on royal affairs were made to kneel in hot sand under the noon sun, until they fainted from heat stroke. Still, Noura and Asim found ways to share fleeting moments. One afternoon, she dropped a jasmine bud from her sleeve as she passed by. That night, she found it pressed between the pages of her prayer book on her writing desk, placed there by an unseen hand. Imagine the terror curling through her chest when she realized someone had entered her chambers unseen. Yet instead of fear, her heart fluttered like a trapped desert sparrow. Love makes fools of us all, or so the poets say. But you probably won't survive a romance like this in Saqqara, where even winking at a royal without permission could earn a week chained in the punishment pits, shoulder deep in biting insects. Each glance and secret token built a bridge between them, stone by stone, despite knowing that if anyone discovered it, their bones would end up bleaching under the same merciless sun. Yet love has always been blind, stubborn, and a little stupid. And in the flickering oil lamp glow of Noura's chambers each night, she'd press her cheek against the cool marble window frame, gazing towards the stables, wondering if he was thinking of her too. You sense something inevitable approaching, like the whisper of a desert storm before it arrives in roaring darkness. But for now, their secret remains theirs alone, until the moon's pull draws them past the final boundary of caution. The palace falls silent at night. You hear only the sigh of palm fronds beyond carved sandstone arches, and the faint drip of fountain water echoing through empty courtyards. It is in this hush that the princess begins to slip away. You see her barefoot, toes silent against cool mosaic tiles as she wraps a plain brown cloak over her embroidered sleeping robe. Beneath the heavy veil covering her face, her eyes glow with reckless determination. Outside her chamber door, 2 guards stand rigid, bronze scimitars strapped across their chests. But tonight, Noura waits patiently in darkness, listening to their breathing slow and deepen as they doze standing upright. One mainstream historical fact: Saqqara's guards used henbane resin mixed with wine to stay awake for long palace vigils, but overuse often dulled their senses at crucial moments. You follow her down narrow servants' passages that smell of old wood smoke and preserved lemons, past storage rooms filled with amphorae of olive oil and date syrup. past laundry courtyards where rows of linen sheets hang ghost-like under moonlight. She slips through a forgotten archway leading to the outer gardens, a path lined with thornless roses bred only for the Sultan's children. Beyond the gardens lies the real world, the kingdom of sand, wind, and whispers. Noura ducks through a break in the crumbling garden wall and emerges onto a faint footpath leading towards the oasis. Historians still argue whether this oasis existed precisely as described in the scrolls. Some claim it was a poetic metaphor, while others believe an underground spring northeast of the city may have once fed a hidden grove long since swallowed by dunes. But tonight, it exists for you. The air cools against your flushed skin as she walks. Her sandals sink slightly into fine, pale sand. Overhead, the moon hangs huge and yellow, like a lantern swaying from heaven's ceiling. She pulls her cloak tighter against the breeze, carrying desert mint and distant camel dung. And there he waits. Asim, sitting beneath a lone acacia tree, its spindly branches etched black against the sky. His eyes meet hers, dark with fear and longing. He rises as she approaches, brushing sand from his rough wool trousers. For a moment, neither moves. Then, he takes her hands, calloused palms enveloping her silken fingers. Here's a quirky tidbit. Desert lovers sometimes chewed small pieces of frankincense before meeting to sweeten their breath, and to calm trembling nerves during forbidden encounters. They sit together on a blanket Asim has laid out, patterned with faded geometrics in saffron and green. Overhead, constellations blaze in silent celebration. Noura tilts her head back, studying the scorpion-shaped cluster of stars her tutor once called the Punisher. A reminder, he said, that sin never goes unseen. But tonight, she closes her eyes and leans into Asim's shoulder. He recites lines from an old stable hand song about mares that gallop free under moonlight. And for once, she laughs, soft, clear, like a stream bubbling over polished stones. You probably won't survive in this kingdom if anyone hears your laughter in the dark with a man not your husband. But for this brief hour, hidden by shadows, they are simply two souls whispering wishes to the night breeze. The oasis water glimmers silver, reflecting moonlight through rippling reeds. Tiny frogs croak, hidden under lotus leaves. And as Noura dips her fingers into the cool pool, her heart feels lighter than it has in years. But even now, beneath the fragrance of wild mint and distant blooming night jasmines, danger prowls closer. For as they sit side by side, a pair of watchful eyes follows every movement from the ridge above, unseen, silent, and ready to shatter this fleeting bliss. The desert winds shift softly across the dunes, whispering secrets from ridge to ridge. Tonight, you stand upon one such slope, feeling fine sand slip beneath your feet as you watch a shadow crouch among sparse thorn bushes. It is the princess's handmaiden, Rhea, her veil pulled low to mask her pale face in the moonlight. Rhea has served Noura since childhood, braiding her hair each dawn, kneeling to lace delicate slippers upon her feet, whispering bedtime prayers into her ear at night. Yet loyalty, in Saqqara, often runs second to survival. One mainstream historical fact: desert royal households frequently assigned handmaidens to report daily movements of their mistresses to palace stewards, a practice formalized by the 11th century to prevent hidden affairs or seditious plots. Historians still argue whether Rhea betrayed Noura out of jealousy or fear. Some scrolls claim she too loved Asim in secret. Others insist her devotion to the Sultan outweighed any fondness she held for the princess. Yet one truth remains unchallenged. Her decision sealed two fates forever. Here's a quirky tidbit. In Saqqara's criminal courts, if an informant's accusation proved false, their punishment mirrored the crime they falsely claimed, ensuring only the most confident came forward. You probably won't survive as a royal servant here if you fail to report such scandalous betrayal. The Sultan's punishments for silence were as harsh as for sin itself. Rhea's mind reels with imagined outcomes: exile, flogging, burial. Better to speak first, to become the herald of justice rather than its target. As dawn approaches, streaking the horizon with bruised purple and ochre, Rhea slips through the servants' archway. Her fingers tremble as she lifts the iron latch to the Sultan's private receiving chamber. Two guards blink in surprise at her presence so early, but her tearful eyes and hoarse whispers of urgent news open the door without question. Inside, the Sultan sits cross-legged on a wide cushion, his beard unbraided in sleep, turban replaced by a soft linen scarf. He looks up with eyes still clouded by dreams as Rhea falls prostrate before him, forehead pressed against the cool marble floor. "Sire, forgive my intrusion at this sacred hour," she whispers, her voice cracking with rehearsed grief. "But I carry a truth that cannot wait for daylight." She hears his quiet sigh, feels his gaze sharpen like a blade pressed against her neck. In this moment, the entire palace seems to hold its breath, waiting for the words that will ripple outward to change lives, end lives, and cement legends that echo for centuries. The Sultan shifts upon his cushion, heavy silken robes pooling around him. His bare feet peek out from under embroidered hems, toes curling slightly as he listens. The scent of amber oil and roasted coffee beans clings to his beard as he leans forward, eyes narrowing. His gaze carries centuries of inherited rule, and his silence crackles like a drawn scimitar. Rhea's mouth dries instantly. One mainstream historical fact: Saqqara's rulers often held early dawn court sessions called Majlis al-Subh, believing judgments made before sunrise carried divine clarity. "Sire," she whispers, barely lifting her face, "I witnessed Princess Noura leaving the palace walls this night. She met with a man by the oasis, a stable hand." The Sultan inhales slowly, his broad chest rising under a robe stitched with tiny gold falcons. Historians still argue whether his fury came from insulted honor or deep paternal heartbreak. Some chronicles describe him as a ruler obsessed with law to the point of cruelty. Others portray him as a father grieving his daughter's foolishness. "Describe him," he commands. Rhea speaks of Asim's simple tunic, the rough sandals, the strong arms used to lift heavy saddles each dawn. Her words paint a portrait of humble masculinity, an unthinkable match for a royal princess raised in ivory towers and perfumed chambers. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some desert courts required witnesses to describe not just a suspect's clothing, but the exact embroidery count on their garments to prove truthful observation. As the Sultan listens, the lantern's flame flutters, casting rippling shadows upon murals of Saqqara's founding battles. His hand grips the carved sandalwood armrest so tightly his knuckles pale beneath henna-stained skin. "You probably won't survive standing in this chamber if you speak lies." Yet Rhea's trembling devotion convinces him. He signals a guard with a flick of his wrist, his eyes now black pools of unreadable depth. "Wake the viziers," he orders, voice rumbling with finality. "Prepare my throne room. Bring the princess before me as dawn breaks." Rhea bows lower, her entire body curling into itself with relief and dread. She has delivered her truth. Its consequences are now out of her hands. As she retreats, the Sultan sits in stillness, staring into the lantern flame. Perhaps he sees his daughter as a child again, running barefoot through palace gardens, her laughter rising like flutes over jasmine blooms. Or perhaps he sees only the law, unbreakable, unmoving, like the desert stone upon which his kingdom was built. Outside, the first hints of sunrise stain the horizon with dusty pink and muted gold. Servants begin to stir in their quarters, unaware that before this day ends, blood will be spilled upon white marble, and the fate of a princess will become legend whispered across the sands for centuries to come. The sun rises over Saqqara in a blaze of molten gold, casting long shadows across palace walls inscribed with verses praising mercy and justice. Though mercy rarely reached the condemned, you stand among the silent crowds gathering in the throne room's outer halls, their sandals whispering against marble as they shuffle for position. Palace guards stand at every archway, spears glinting in the early light. The air tastes of copper and incense smoke, drifting from braziers placed to cleanse the space of evil spirits before judgment. Within, the Sultan sits upon his towering throne of carved ivory, inlaid with turquoise and blood-red garnets that glow like angry eyes. His beard is freshly braided, threaded with gold strands, and his heavy crown presses down upon his brow as if the very weight of justice rests there. Historians still argue whether this event was held publicly or behind closed doors. Some ancient scrolls claim only viziers and the royal family witnessed the trial, while others describe throngs of citizens packed against colonnades, trembling at what they saw. The princess enters, flanked by two spear-bearing guards. Her hair is covered by a thick veil, but you glimpse her trembling fingers clutching its edges. Chains circle her delicate wrists like iron vipers, each link ringing softly with her halting steps. One mainstream historical fact: women of Saqqara's royal family wore silver ankle bracelets engraved with protective prayers, believed to guard them from curses and betrayal. Noura's bracelets peek out beneath her long robe, catching torchlight with each fearful step. At the foot of the throne lies Asim. You see his arms bound behind him, wrists raw from rope burns. Two guards press him to the floor, his tunic stained with sand and sweat. His face is turned sideways, cheek pressed against the marble. A trickle of blood slips from his split lip onto the shining floor, forming a single crimson teardrop. The Sultan's lips tighten into a thin line. One vizier winces almost imperceptibly at the boy's naive confession. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some desert courts allowed a condemned man's family to offer gold equal to his body weight to buy freedom, but only if the crime involved property or livestock. Never adultery with royal blood. But the Sultan does not look at her. His stare remains locked upon the boy, and within it gleams both ancient rage and sadness deeper than a desert well. With a small flick of his fingers, a gesture lighter than brushing sand from silk, he seals the stable hand's fate. Guards tighten their grip on Asim's arms. Two step forward with curved khopesh blades gleaming under torchlight. You close your eyes as steel flashes once, twice, and silence follows. A single drop of blood spatters the marble between the Sultan's sandals. The scent of iron fills the throne room, mingling with drifting incense. Noura crumples forward in chains, her muffled scream echoing off the mosaic walls depicting Saqqara's glorious battles. Justice is swift in Saqqara, and for the princess who broke its laws, her punishment has only just begun. The sun climbs higher, bleaching the palace walls into blinding white. You find yourself following a procession, winding through narrow alleys behind the royal grounds. The hush of dawn replaced by murmuring voices, heavy with dread. 4 guards march at the front, their bronze helmets reflecting harsh light. Behind them walk priests robed in dark indigo, chanting verses of purification. They carry clay jugs of perfumed oil and iron incense burners that spit tendrils of myrrh and benzoin smoke into the morning air. The scent clings to your throat, thick and bitter, making it hard to breathe. One mainstream historical fact: burial alive was documented in several ancient desert kingdoms, often reserved for adultery, espionage, or blasphemy, believed to trap the condemned soul within earth forever as punishment beyond death. In the middle of the procession walks Princess Noura, her wrists still chained, though lighter now that her father's judgment is sealed. She wears a plain white linen robe, tied with a fraying rope at her waist. Her veil is gone, revealing tear-streaked cheeks and lips trembling with silent prayers. Her hair falls unbound around her shoulders, dark and matted with sweat. Around her, Servants and stable hands gather to watch. They stand silent, clutching date palms or prayer beads, eyes cast down in shame or fear. No one dares meet her gaze as she passes, barefoot on sun-warmed stone. The chains rattle softly with each step, a hollow, mournful music. Historians still argue whether the Sultan's punishment was driven by pure law or by an unspoken shame that his daughter's sin might stain his entire reign. Some later poets described his fury as divine wrath, while others whispered he wept alone that night, cradling her childhood sandals in trembling hands. Here's a quirky tidbit. Desert priests often sprinkled graves with ground-up malachite powder to ward off jinn said to feed on guilty souls. At the city's eastern gate, the procession halts. Beyond lies the endless dune sea, rippling gold under the rising sun. Two guards stand with iron shovels planted firmly in sand. Before them yawns a narrow grave, freshly dug, its earthen walls lined with tightly packed clay to prevent collapsing too soon. You probably won't survive if you stumble too close now. The guards would strike you down without a word for disrupting sacred justice. Even the camels tied nearby stand silent, long lashes blinking solemnly in the rising heat. Noura's knees buckle as the priests begin their chants, words vibrating low like the hum of distant thunder. She prays softly under her breath, her voice catching on every syllable. She remembers her mother's lullabies, sweet melodies once sung under starlit balconies, scented with jasmine. She remembers Asim's last words, "Forgive me," echoing through her chest with each shallow breath. And as the guards step forward, gripping her arms firmly but not cruelly, she feels the first sting of morning sun upon her face. It burns with all the finality of law. Around her, chanting rises and falls in rhythmic waves, a sorrowful dirge carried on desert winds. You watch as she closes her eyes, her body trembling under the weight of what awaits. The scent of myrrh thickens, mingling with the sharp, dry tang of freshly turned earth. Sand shifts beneath her toes as the guards lead her forward, towards the edge of the grave that will swallow her whole before noon. The grave yawns before you, a narrow pit just wide enough for a human body to lie flat, its packed clay walls smelling of ancient earth and bitter roots. The chanting priests circle its rim, their bare feet stirring fine sand into curling dust clouds that rise and dissolve under the blazing sun. You see Princess Noura standing at the edge, shoulders slumped beneath the heavy iron chains coiled around her wrists and ankles. Her hair hangs limp and dark, clinging to tear-streaked cheeks. For a moment, her eyes scan the gathered faces, seeking a glimpse of mercy. But every gaze drops swiftly to the ground. One mainstream historical fact: burial alive in Saqqara was performed according to precise rituals overseen by temple priests to seal the sin beneath earth and protect the kingdom from its spiritual taint. The priests place clay jars filled with myrrh, cinnamon bark, and crushed frankincense around the grave. Their chanting rises into a harsh, discordant rhythm that makes your chest tighten. Each phrase punctuated by the hiss of incense smoke, drifting skyward in twisting ribbons. Historians still argue whether the burial rite originated with Saqqara's nomadic ancestors, or was adopted from neighboring empires as a show of imperial severity. Some texts suggest it emerged from older fertility rituals, twisted into punishment by kings seeking absolute obedience. Here's a quirky tidbit. Desert priests believed burying the condemned with a live scorpion ensured their soul's eternal torment. Though, in Noura's case, records do not confirm if this final cruelty was enacted. The guards approach, gripping her arms firmly. You watch her feet stumble forward, chains scraping rock and sand in mournful harmony. The priests' chants grow louder, almost feverish, as they raise their hands towards the rising sun, calling upon its unblinking eye to witness justice. You probably won't survive watching such a rite without trembling. Even the camel handlers standing nearby avert their eyes, clutching fistfuls of sand in silent prayer. For to witness royal punishment is to feel its shadow brush your own fragile life. Noura's chest heaves with shallow breaths as the priests anoint her forehead with bitter-smelling oil, streaking it with black lines that drip down her nose and cheeks. She does not resist. Her lips move in prayer, reciting verses her mother taught her under cooler moons. "Forgive me, forgive me, forgive me." A priest steps forward, holding a reed basket containing strips of oiled linen and thin cords. His voice is calm as he announces the ceremonial words to those gathered, declaring her sin, her punishment, and the kingdom's protection from her impurity. They bind her wrists tightly with linen, then her ankles, then loop a cord around her knees to keep her legs folded together. The chains clink softly as they settle against her robe. A guard produces a narrow wooden pole, smoothed from years of ritual use, and fastens it behind her back, forcing her shoulders upright so she will face east, even within the earth. You notice how her eyes, though swollen with tears, remain open and unblinking, locked upon the pale, cloudless sky. Perhaps she searches for her mother's spirit, or for Asim's soul, lingering nearby like desert wind. The priests chant a final invocation to seal the grave against evil spirits, their words blending with the faint whisper of shifting dunes beyond the city walls. The guards grip her shoulders, turning her gently until her feet touch the edge. And as the final prayer ends, they lower her into the grave, inch by inch, until her white-robed body vanishes into the shadowed earth. The chanting fades to silence, broken only by the keening cry of a lone desert hawk wheeling overhead, circling this ritual of life and law, love and death. Beneath the endless, indifferent sky, you feel the heat rising from the sand as you stand at the grave's edge. The sun now blazing high enough to set shimmering mirages dancing across the dunes. The chanting has ended, replaced by a heavy silence that presses against your chest. Below, Princess Noura kneels within the narrow grave, her linen-bound limbs trembling against the packed clay walls. Chains coil around her like cold serpents, their iron links biting into her skin with every quiver of fear. Her long dark hair spills forward, gathering dust as she lowers her forehead to the earth. One mainstream historical fact. Before burial, condemned women in Saqqara were chained and robed in white, as symbols of purity lost, an ironic reminder of the innocence the kingdom believed they had forsaken. The priests move around the rim, sprinkling ground frankincense mixed with powdered amber into the pit, chanting softly under their breath to seal her fate. Their voices are calm and detached, as though reading shopping lists or reciting weather omens, rather than preparing to bury a living woman. Historians still argue whether the ritual's cruelty was born purely from punitive zeal, or if it carried older sacrificial echoes meant to return impurity to the earth goddess. Some fragments of temple poetry hint at deeper meanings now lost beneath centuries of drifting sand. Here's a quirky tidbit. Records say that during such rites, priests wore sandals with upturned curled toes, so the condemned could not see their footprints, denying them any final earthly connection or memory. Noura's breath comes in ragged sobs as a priest bends down, his face lined with age, his eyes dark and unreadable. He holds a small clay jug painted with cobalt scorpions, and you smell bitter oil wafting from its mouth. With a swift, practiced motion, he pours it over her hair and shoulders, anointing her with what they call the oil of final silence. Its scent is sharp and metallic, like rusted iron mixed with ash. She lifts her head slightly, lips moving in silent prayer. Her eyes flicker upward, seeking sky, sun, and forgiveness. You probably won't survive looking into those eyes for long. The raw sorrow there could turn your heart to crumbling clay. At her knees, chains clink with every shallow breath as guards tighten the linen bindings. Two men grip ropes tight around her shoulders and chest, ensuring she will remain upright as earth presses in. Her spine arches painfully against the wooden pole strapped behind her back, forcing her to face east, towards the city and palace she will never see again. The priests begin their final chant, voices weaving through the hot morning air with hypnotic rhythm. Earth take her, sand cover her, stone silence. Her sun forgive her. The gathered mourners sway with each verse, some weeping quietly, others standing dry-eyed, unmoved by the fate unfolding before them. Among them are older women who remember the last burial alive decades ago, their lined faces empty of pity, their eyes dulled by memories of laws older than any of their tears. Nora tries to whisper a final prayer to her mother, but her voice cracks, drowned by the priest's chants. Tears streak down her cheeks, dripping onto the dusty clay floor of her grave. Around you, wind stirs the dunes, shifting the sand in thin, curling wisps. A donkey brays distantly. The scent of myrrh clings to your tongue, mingling with the bitter tang of fear. And as the chanting rises to its final note, the guards step forward with baskets of sand, ready to begin covering her trembling, bound form under the merciless gaze of the sun. The air stills, heavy with heat and incense smoke, as the guards lift the first baskets of sand. You feel the world hold its breath, the faint breeze pausing as if unwilling to disturb this grim ritual. Princess Nora kneels in the grave, her linen-bound limbs trembling against packed clay. Sweat beads on her brow, dripping down to mix with tears as she watches the guards approach. Her heart hammers so loudly you almost hear it through the chanting that thrums in the air above her. One mainstream historical fact: burial alive was not a quick execution. Records show it was designed to prolong suffering, ensuring the condemned felt every moment of earth closing around them, a punishment not only of the body, but of the spirit. The first guard tilts his basket. Warm sand cascades down in a hushed rush, grains pattering against her shoulders and pooling around her folded legs. A second guard pours his basketful next, the sand rising to her waist in moments. She gasps at its weight, her chest shuddering with panicked breaths as it presses against her ribs. Historians still argue whether the buried remained conscious until suffocation, or whether heat stroke claimed them first. Some desert physicians wrote that the psychological torment alone was enough to rupture the heart before the sands finished their work. Here's a quirky tidbit. Saqqara's burial priests often sprinkled a final pinch of powdered onyx over the sand's surface to seal the spirit within and blind its gaze from heaven. Nora tilts her head back, trying to keep her face above the rising sand. Her hair clings to her tear-wet cheeks, chains digging deeper into her flesh as her body strains against its bonds. She murmurs prayers between gasps. Mother, forgive me. Asim, wait for me. Allah, mercy. You probably won't survive witnessing this without feeling your chest tighten. Even the sternest vizier looks away, pressing a handkerchief to his mouth as if holding back bile. The chanting rises again, rhythmic and hypnotic. Sand cover sin. Sand seal breath. Sand carry her to silent death. Basket by basket. The sand rises. It fills the grave to her shoulders, then to her chin. Her breath comes in short, ragged sobs as the grains shift against her neck, gritty and hot. She tries to keep her mouth closed, but tears slip past her trembling lips. Salty and bitter, the final guard steps forward, holding a half-full basket. The priest raises his hand to halt him momentarily. He bends down, murmuring the final words of condemnation directly into Nora's ear. You see her eyes flutter closed as she listens, her lashes wet and heavy with sand-dusted tears. Then the priest straightens, gives a solemn nod, and the guard tips the basket forward. Sand pours over her face, muffling her final cry. For a moment, her head jerks against the bindings, her chains clinking softly, but the sand fills every hollow, pressing down until only silence remains beneath the blazing sun. The priests begin their closing chant, as guards pack the sand tightly with flat wooden paddles. ensuring no air pockets remain. The scent of myrrh and onyx powder drifts across the grave as they work, mixing with the harsh smell of hot, sun-baked earth. Around you, the assembled mourners remain silent. Some close their eyes in prayer, others stare blankly, the cruelty of law etched anew upon their hearts. Above, the desert hawk circles once more, its lonely cry echoing across the dunes, as if marking the final passage of her soul. The morning has turned to blazing noon. You feel the sun press upon your skin like a branding iron as the priests step back from the grave, their chants fading into the whispering desert breeze. Before them lies only a smooth mound of sand, packed firm and flat, marked by a ring of small black stones and sprinkled with powdered onyx that glitters like shards of midnight. Women gather around the grave's edge, their faces veiled in translucent white gauze. Some hold clay jugs of perfumed water, others clutch prayer beads carved from rosewood and ivory. Their eyes are dark and downcast as they sway and begin their mourning ritual. One mainstream historical fact: it was customary in Saqqara for female mourners to cast handfuls of sand upon the grave while chanting prayers, believing each grain carried a plea for divine forgiveness. They sing in wavering unison, their voices trembling with grief and fear. Forgive her. O sun, forgive her. O sand, forgive her. O sky, carry her home with mercy. One by one, they scoop warm sand into their palms and let it slip through their fingers, golden grains trickling down onto the grave as the chant continues. The fragrance of rosewater mixed with crushed mint drifts from their jugs, masking the sharper scent of earth and myrrh. It curls through the hot, still air, mingling with incense smoke that rises in thin blue spirals from the priest's censers. Historians still argue whether this rite was born out of pity or simply ritual duty to protect the mourners from vengeance by the condemned's restless spirit. Some scrolls suggest women secretly sympathized with those buried alive, though their tears changed nothing in the kingdom's law-bound world. Here's a quirky tidbit. During burial chants, older widows often hid shards of turquoise within their veils, believing it deflected the death spirit's gaze away from them. As the chanting fades, silence settles once more. The mourners withdraw, leaving behind only the priests and guards. A final prayer is spoken by the high priest, his cracked voice echoing in the noon heat. May earth forgive the blood that bore her. May sand silence the breath that loved him. May the sun burn clean her secret sin, and may no voice speak her name again. You probably won't survive a midday here without shade or water. Even the guards squint against the glaring sky, sweat streaking down their temples beneath bronze helmets. The priests gather their jars and censers, their dark indigo robes heavy with clinging sand at the hems. Slowly, they begin their walk back to the city gates, leaving 2 guards posted at the grave until sunset, and beneath the smooth mound of sand, silence reigns. The dunes ripple in the dry wind, whispering against the clay grave lining. Tiny beetles scuttle across the black stone border, their delicate feet leaving fleeting trails before the breeze erases them. You watch the guards stand motionless, eyes locked upon the horizon where heat haze dances like restless spirits. In the distance, camel bells jingle faintly as caravans trudge towards the city's western gate, unaware of the grave beyond the eastern walls and the princess who lies buried within the earth's ancient heart. The desert sun begins its slow descent, casting long, blue shadows across the dunes. You stand near the grave, feeling the cooled evening breeze stir against your skin, carrying with it scents of dust, myrrh, and distant cooking fires from the city beyond the palace walls. The guards remain at their posts beside the grave, spears planted firmly in the sand. Their eyes scan the horizon, watchful and silent, their bronze helmets glowing dimly in the dying light. One shifts his stance slightly, wincing as stiff knees crack. The other remains utterly still, his gaze locked upon the mound of sand that conceals what was once Saqqara's jewel. Princess Noura, One mainstream historical fact. Royal burial punishments in desert kingdoms required guards to remain until sunset to prevent grieving family members from attempting forbidden rescue before the spirit had passed fully into the underworld. The priests have long since departed, their indigo robes swallowed by the shimmering heat haze of the city road. Only faint lines of sandal prints remain, soon to be erased by drifting grains. The women, mourners too, have vanished behind palace gates, their prayer chants echoing briefly in memory before silence returns. Historians still argue whether any of her sisters or cousins dared come here later in secret to weep upon her grave. Some poems hint at hidden vigils under moonlight, though official records remain blank, wiped clean like names carved into wet clay before it dries. Here's a quirky tidbit. Desert burial guards were forbidden to speak to one another during their watch, to keep the grave pure from mortal gossip. As temple laws phrased it, the sun sinks lower, painting the dunes in molten gold and bruised violet. You hear the faint drone of locusts rising from thorn bushes nearby, their chorus filling the quiet with uneasy vibration. Overhead, a falcon wheels in wide, lazy arcs, its feathers catching last golden rays, before it dives silently towards a distant mouse skittering across the sand. You probably won't survive such punishment if you were born outside royal blood. For commoners, adultery carried quicker, simpler death, beheading or whipping to death under the watchful eyes of the city guard. But for a princess, law demanded an example worthy of centuries of fearful remembrance. The guards shift again as twilight deepens. The first stars prick the indigo sky, pale and trembling. A breeze rises from the east, curling around the grave and stirring tiny ripples across its smooth-packed surface. A fine trickle of sand slips down the mound side, vanishing into the cooling earth. As the sky darkens further, torches flicker to life along the palace walls in the distance, their flames wavering in the gathering night. You stand silent, watching the guards straighten as footsteps approach from behind. Two palace servants arrive, carrying brass lanterns and thin iron rods. Without a word, they plant the lanterns upon spiked stands at either end of the grave, their small flames casting pools of trembling light across the sand. They bow to the guards and depart, sandals whispering against stone as they vanish into the darkness. Now the grave lies illuminated under silent watch. No chanting, no prayers, only the rasp of locusts in thorn bushes and the deepening shadows stretching across the dunes like dark wings folding around the sleeping earth. Night has fallen fully upon Saqqara, draping the dunes in thick velvet darkness pierced only by the flickering lanterns at either end of the grave. You stand between their dim golden pools of light, listening to the whispering breeze that carries the cool scent of sagebrush and distant acacia blooms through the silent burial ground. The two guards remain in place, motionless silhouettes against the starlit horizon. Their shadows stretch long and wavering across the sand, merging with the night in silent vigil. You see their eyes glint faintly beneath bronze helmets as they scan the dunes, ever watchful for desert wolves, grave robbers, or grieving kin who might defy law for a final touch of their beloved. One mainstream historical fact. Saqqara's burial watchers were chosen from among veteran guards with no close family ties, believed less likely to show mercy or be swayed by bribes and tears. Above, the sky glitters with uncountable stars, each one sharp and cold, like grains of diamond scattered by an unseen hand. The moon has not yet risen, leaving the dunes bathed in faint, silver-blue starlight. Somewhere far beyond the palace walls, a hyena laughs softly, its cackling call floating over the dunes before fading into silence once more. Historians still argue whether Noura's mother was truly dead before this burial, or if her absence from records was an intentional erasure to sever the princess from any lingering claim of protection. Some say the queen died in childbirth, Others whisper she was exiled to a distant desert monastery after speaking against the Sultan's harsh decrees. Here's a quirky tidbit. Desert burial guards carried small flasks of cactus sap wine to keep awake during night watches. Though temple law forbade them from becoming drunk, lest they sleep and let restless spirits escape. You probably won't survive a desert night without warmth. And the guards know it. Beneath their bronze breastplates, they wear padded wool robes that trap body heat against the plummeting chill. Frost does not form here, but the deep desert winds carry a biting cold that seeps into bone. Hours pass. The lantern flames flicker and shrink as oil burns low, casting shifting shadows across the smooth grave mound. A thin wisp of incense smoke curls from a clay censer left behind by the priests, its embers glowing faintly orange in the gloom. One guard clears his throat softly, a brief, grating sound swallowed by the endless hush of night. He shifts his spear to his other hand, rolling his stiff shoulders to ease their ache. The other remains still as carved stone, his breath visible in faint white puffs rising and dissolving under starlight. The dunes lie silent in their vastness, rippling outwards towards the horizon, each crest casting deeper shadows down its flanks. The grave sits at the center of this quiet darkness, lit only by dying lantern flames. Beneath the earth, all is silent. No chants, no prayers, no breath. You look up at the stars again, wondering which one Noura's spirit has chosen to inhabit, if her soul escaped the binding chants and onyx seal. In Saqqara, some say the condemned become night winds, forever roaming the dunes, whispering sorrow into the ears of those who pass. A sudden gust sweeps across the grave, fluttering the lantern flames violently before fading again. Sand grains skitter across the packed mound, rattling like whispered words lost to the desert's eternal silence. Dawn approaches once more over Saqqara, a thin pale band of light spreading across the eastern horizon. You watch it bloom from smoky indigo into a muted lavender glow, outlining each dune's graceful curve in gentle, silvery relief. The two grave guards remain at their posts, their shadows shrinking into themselves as the first rays of morning sun slip over the sand. Their faces are gaunt with exhaustion, eyes red-rimmed from sleepless vigilance, but neither flinches nor rests. Duty ends only when the priests return to complete the ritual cycle. One mainstream historical fact: royal burial vigils in Saqqara lasted from sunrise to sunrise, requiring a full day-night-day guard before final sealing prayers allowed watchers to depart. The lanterns sputter and die as their oil burns away. Faint curls of blackened smoke drift up and vanish into dawn's slow warmth. In the quiet that follows, you hear the faint rustle of shifting sand, the dunes waking under new light. A lone desert lark trills from a thorn bush nearby, its high, sweet notes piercing the stillness with aching clarity. The guards do not turn towards the sound. Their gazes remain fixed upon the grave mound, watching for signs of shifting earth or any breach of its tightly packed surface. Historians still argue whether her father, the Sultan, came here at dawn to gaze upon the grave of his favorite daughter. Some scribes wrote of a lone figure in gold-threaded robes standing under the rising sun, head bowed in silent prayer. Others dismiss this as poet's embellishment meant to soften a tale of merciless justice. Here's a quirky tidbit. Desert vigils often concluded with the burning of bitter aloe wood at the grave's edge, its acrid smoke believed to drive away jinn that might feed on the condemned soul and haunt nearby settlements. You probably won't survive long pondering such mercy here. Saqqara's law remains absolute. Even rulers must bow before its harsh decrees or risk their people's rebellion. The Sultan's decision sealed not only Noura's fate, but his legacy as an unyielding guardian of moral order. As the sun rises higher, you watch two priests approach from the eastern road, their indigo robes stirring softly in the morning breeze. They carry clay jars and small bronze bowls, thin trails of incense drifting behind them like ghostly ribbons. They bow once to the guards before circling the grave. Their chants are quiet, weary from hours of prayer and ritual duty. You hear the final invocation spoken 3 times, each repetition softer than the last, fading into the dawn winds. Earth takes in, sand keeps silence. Sky forget name. One priest sprinkles powdered lapis lazuli over the mound. Bright blue grains gleaming briefly before sinking into golden sand. The other places a thin silver disc, inscribed with protective verses atop the grave center. Its polished surface catches the newborn sun, flashing a final shard of brilliance before the priests gather their jars and depart. The guards bow low to the grave and turn away, their vigil complete. As they march back towards the palace gates, their sandals leave 2 winding trails in the pale morning sand. Twin paths that will soon vanish under the restless desert breeze. And so Princess Noura's punishment ends. Her story buried beneath earth. Her name stricken from palace records. Her memory surviving only in secret desert poems and hushed stories told by mothers to daughters in flickering lamplight. You stand alone beside her grave. The dunes stretching outwards in silent rippling waves towards a horizon burning with pale gold. A single falcon wheels high above, its cry sharp and lonely as it greets the dawn over the kingdom of Saqqara, where law remains stronger than love, and the desert keeps its secrets hidden forever. The morning advances, warm light spreading across the dunes until the sand glows pale gold under the awakening sky. You stand by Noura's grave, silent in the gathering heat as the priests and guards vanish behind you, their footsteps swallowed by drifting grains. Around the burial site, the world begins its daily rhythms once more. A caravan of traders crests a distant dune, camels swaying under loads of dates and copper ingots bound for the palace markets. Their bells chime faintly in the rising breeze, mingling with the soft cooing of doves roosting atop the outer palace walls. One mainstream historical fact: Saqqara's trade caravans passed burial grounds each dawn. An unspoken reminder that law governed all. Merchants, slaves, and royal blood alike. You watch as desert hares dart between thorn bushes, long ears flicking at the first warmth. Locusts whir in low bushes, their wings clicking in dry rhythm. Beyond them, palace servants emerge to sweep courtyard tiles clean of wind-blown sand. Unaware or unwilling to think of the silent grave beyond the eastern gate. Here's a quirky tidbit. In later centuries, desert nomads avoided camping near old royal graves, believing restless spirits of the buried would bring sudden sandstorms or fevered dreams of suffocation. You probably won't survive wandering too far into this desert alone. The sun climbs higher with each passing moment, burning away morning shadows and drawing shimmering mirages across the dunes' shifting crests. The grave before you lies quiet, its surface smooth, marked only by the small silver disc inscribed with protective verses. Its edges glitter faintly as wind sweeps over them, brushing fine sand grains into ghostly ripples that soon erase every trace of footsteps. You wonder if her spirit lingers here, watching the rising sun she was denied, or if it drifts far beyond the dunes, seeking the quiet shadows where Asim's memory waits like a cool oasis under moonlit skies. Perhaps she is the breeze itself, sighing through the thorn trees in sorrowful lullaby. In Saqqara, her name is never spoken aloud. Yet, in hidden places, mothers whisper her story to daughters as warning, or as secret reminder that love, though forbidden and fleeting, still burns brighter than the hottest desert noon. The wind lifts again, fluttering your robe against your ankles as it sweeps across the grave mound. It carries the scent of warm sand and myrrh, curling around your face in a final silent benediction. And as you turn away, leaving the grave to its eternal quiet, you hear the faint echo of priest's final chant lingering in memory. Earth takes in, sand keeps silence, sky forget name. Now, as the sun climbs higher into the pale desert sky, Allow your breath to slow and soften. Feel the warmth of morning light spread gently across your closed eyelids, like a silken veil laid over your thoughts. The dunes stretch away in rippling waves of gold and ivory, quiet and endless under the rising sun. You stand there for a final moment, listening to the hush that settles upon the earth once the chants have faded and the guards have departed. Even the breeze calms, moving only in slow sighs that stir loose grains of sand across the grave, smoothing them into graceful curves and silent undulations. Imagine the distant hawk gliding high above, its wings cutting clean paths through the cool dawn air. Feel its effortless drifting, circling under the pale vault of sky, seeing the world as a place of quiet patterns, dunes, grave, palace towers, caravan lines winding like thin braids across the horizon. Allow your breath to match that drifting flight, long and slow and quiet. Inhale, and let the warm scent of sunlit sand and faint myrrh fill your senses. Exhale, and release all tension downwards into the earth, letting it sink beneath you, beyond thought, beyond memory, beyond words. And now, with the desert stretching out endlessly around you, glowing softly under the first touch of day, let your body grow heavier upon your bed. Feel each muscle loosen, each thought slow, as you drift like wind-blown sand into silence, into warmth, into rest. Sleep well, gentle soul. The desert is quiet tonight, and all its secrets lie hidden beneath dreaming dunes.